Hello, my name is Terry DeWalt, and I'm the program director and a psychologist at a program called Sexual Assault Services, which is a program of Lutheran Social Services here in Racine County. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about sexual violence, including some definitions of sexual violence, some common trauma responses, and a case example. Sexual Assault Services is what's considered to be Racine County's sexual assault crisis, treatment, and prevention center, and we are designed to meet all the needs of sexual assault survivors and their families, from crisis intervention through long-term counseling and support. Some of the services that we provide include a 24-hour crisis line that is available to anybody who has any questions or concerns or needs support regarding sexual assault anytime, day or night. And we also respond to 2 hospitals 24 hours a day whenever a sexual assault victim comes in for medical services. That's Wheaton Franciscan here in Racine, as well as Burlington Memorial Hospital in Burlington. Beyond that, we provide services at the Racine County Child Advocacy Center. We provide services to the families that are being seen there if there's a suspicion that one of the children has been abused in some way. We provide them information about what to expect. We coordinate ongoing services for them after they leave there and answer any questions they might have. In addition, we help provide support to families that are going through the court system if they're prosecuting an offender. So we provide legal advocacy to families that can entail going into court for them or with them, as well as working with the DA's office or a victim witness office to be prepared for court hearings. Our services are available in both English and Spanish, and that we have a bilingual outreach advocate to ensure that our Spanish-speaking population has the services that they need and deserve. Beyond those, we also provide prevention education programming in the schools and some community awareness programming. Some of the more in-depth programming that we provide include support groups, and those are provided by 4 SAS therapists. Those groups include an adolescent survivors support group, a women's survivors group, a male survivors group, and a caregivers support group. This is a picture of one of our counseling rooms. This is a typical room where we provide counseling in for some of the kids or adolescents that we work with. We try to make it a comfortable space for the clients that come in, so it's as homey and comfortable as possible. In terms of our therapy services, we do provide individual, couples, family therapy as well to any survivor of sexual assault as well as their families. We have 4 therapists that are available, and all of these services are provided free of charge. Here's a picture of one of our counseling rooms. We do have services for all age ranges, so we work with children over the age of 4 up until older adults, and so we have a lot of games and toys and things like that are available for kids to play with. So thinking about what is sexual assault, it's something that we hear a lot about, but sometimes we don't always know exactly what specifically that means. And what it refers to overall is any unwanted sexual contact or intercourse that's obviously without consent. So it can range from fondling to incest to rape, kind of the whole gamut. Often the rates of sexual violence are underestimated within our society. What we do know is that between 1 in 3 and 1 in 5 women will be sexually assaulted at some point in their lifetime, and the average age of a female sexual assault victim is 15. For males, the numbers do vary as well, but it can be between 1 in 6 to 1 in 9 males at some point when their life will be sexually assaulted, and the average age of a male victim is 12 years old. One thing we do know is that it is hard to keep track of how often sexual assaults are happening, and one of the reasons for that is that usually about 1/3 of all sexual assault victims report the assault to law enforcement. That's obviously quite low if you're looking at 2/3 of people not ever reporting these incidents happening. There's lots of reasons why people choose not to report. There's a fear of retaliation, that the offender might come back and do something to harm them or their family members. They may feel ashamed or embarrassed about it. They may simply not know what to do. Sometimes they feel that they're to blame for what happened. That may be because they think they did something to cause it, or because the offender, him or herself, actually said that they did something to cause it. And they might also be afraid of being arrested. For example, if they were engaging in something that they shouldn't have been at the time, if it was an adolescent who was drinking, for example, they may be afraid of reporting that for fear that they also will get in trouble. So there's obviously a lot of reasons why people don't report, and that's another reason. That is a reason why it's important to provide support to people who do report. In regards to child survivors, it's important to know that children between the ages of 11 and 24 are at 4 times greater risk for sexual assault. And so it's something to be aware of in terms of risk factors when you have children or you're working with kids, that they are at an age that's extremely vulnerable for sexual violence to occur. Also, it's good to know that in Wisconsin, the legal age for consent for sexual contact is 16, and the legal age for consent for intercourse is 18. Sometimes there's some confusion about what that means, and it's important to know that those are the ages that legally it's okay for consent. And then also regarding child survivors, it's important to know that offenders often use a pretty thorough grooming process to engage children into the abuse behavior. They'll do things like buy them presents or call them, their special friend or their special, family member, however that relationship is categorized. And we'll also do things in terms of threatening them to make sure that they don't tell, saying, your parents won't love you anymore, or I'm going to hurt your pet, whatever it might be. So it can be pretty frightening for child survivors. It is important to know that all survivors respond differently to a sexual assault or other type of sexual trauma experience, and that some factors that affect how somebody might respond include their age, if they have experienced an assault before, his or her support system, and then personality characteristics that are unique to that person. Just to touch on the support system piece a little bit more, I think it's important to recognize that that is a huge impact on how somebody responds to a sexual assault or a sexual abuse situation. For example, if you have a child or an adolescent who is abused and they tell a family member about that and that family member believes them, the chances of them being able to heal from that in a way that is best for them and have the best chance of healing is higher than if you have a response that is not supportive of that child. So some possible responses to sexual trauma include not only a fight and flight response, but also more commonly is what we experience as a freeze response, in that when somebody is in a situation that they don't know how to respond to, they kind of freeze up and they don't really know how to get out of that situation. So they don't necessarily fight back, they don't necessarily run away, they kind of freeze and what we call dissociate in that situation, where they focus on some maybe minor detail in the room and kind of their body goes a little numb for them. So we see that often happening with sexual assault survivors. Other common possible responses include delayed reporting. In fact, delayed reporting is the norm within sexual violence situations. The vast majority of people, as we've mentioned, don't actually ever do report sexual violence having occurred to them. And the ones that do most commonly wait at least a few days or so to report that, for a lot of the reasons that we just mentioned. Other responses might include actually being kind of agitated and upset, crying and sobbing, some of those things that you might expect to see, expressing anger, things like that. But we also do see a lot of survivors who respond by withdrawing or being very quiet, minimizing or denying that the incident occurred in the first place, or even kind of laughing nervously. I think it's important to remember that we all respond to different types of crisis situations in our own unique way, and just because somebody doesn't respond in a way that you would expect doesn't mean that it didn't happen or that it wasn't a big deal, it didn't really affect them. It's just really how they're coping with that situation at that time. Often, though, survivors do feel feelings of guilt, shame, or blame. That's a very common response for survivors. So some of the consequences of sexual violence include that rape victims can be 9 times more likely to commit. I'm screwing that up again. All right, I'm going to start again. Okay. Some of the consequences of sexual violence include that rape victims are 9 times more likely than non-victims to have attempted suicide, as well as victims of rape are 13.5 times more likely than non-victims to have alcohol problems, and 26 more times likely to have serious drug problems. So some other consequences of sexual violence include eating disorders. What we know that sexual abuse survivors are significantly more likely to report an eating disorder than someone who has not experienced sexual trauma. One study found that 63% of women who were sexually abused as children had had an eating disorder. In addition, the rates of teen pregnancy among sexual assault victims is quite high. What we know is that about 62% of teen moms have experienced a sexual assault before their first pregnancy. Homelessness is another problem for people who've experienced sexual violence. What we find is that About 38% of homeless women have had a history of childhood sexual abuse, and then an additional 46% have experienced a rape as an adult. And overall, in general, we find that about an estimated 3.8 million women suffer from rape-related PTSD. It's important to keep in mind that these types of experiences have a significant impact on the development of the individual. A lot of us are familiar with Erikson's 8 stages of development, and what we find is that the time frame in which the assault or the abuse occurred has an impact on that individual's ability to kind of move on to the next developmental stage. So for example, in infancy, the developmental stage is to develop either trust or mistrust. For a preschooler, it's initiative versus guilt. School-age children, it's industry versus inferiority. And what we know is that what happens is that when somebody experiences a trauma at a certain point in that person's life, if that trauma is not adequately resolved, that individual will have a hard time moving on to the next psychosocial stage. So for example, if somebody is assaulted in adolescence, which is the stage that you are hoping to develop ego identity versus ego confusion, they will have a hard time moving on to the next stage in development for young adulthood. And that's also another reason why it's really important that we provide services to those who have been affected by sexual violence as early as possible, so we can try and help them to move on to the next stage of development in a healthy way. At this time, I'm going to tell you a little bit about a case example of somebody we've worked with here in our program. It just kind of give you a feel for some of the kind of clients that we work with here and how they cope with what they experienced. So one of our clients, obviously all of her identifying information has been altered to protect her identity, and some of the major characteristics have also been altered so that we can protect her identity. But I will call her Lynn. She is a 34-year-old woman who has a developmental disability, and she was sexually assaulted by 2 men who she met, and they gave her a ride to her house. We saw her originally at the hospital. As I mentioned, we respond to the hospitals 24 hours a day, and she was one of those individuals who actually did respond and report right away. And we provided her with support and information during the time at the hospital, as well as information about something called the Crime Victim Compensation Program, which is a program which provides up to $40,000 to individuals who've been a victim of a crime in the state of Wisconsin. And it's throughout the course of somebody's life they're able to be compensated for expenses that are related to that crime. So it could be medical expenses or therapy expenses, anything that is associated with that crime. Anyhow, so our client, Lynn, began to receive counseling services from one of the SAS therapists here after being seen at the hospital. And she had what might be considered kind of a classical response to this sexual trauma that she experienced. She had a lot of symptoms of PTSD, including nightmares, panic attacks, flashbacks. She had trouble trusting other people and felt a great deal of shame and guilt regarding the assault. Throughout the time of counseling, she developed a toolkit of resources that helped her to kind of deal with any of those types of symptoms with, her counselor, obviously. So we had a set of tools that she could use whenever needed, when she was experiencing a nightmare, a panic attack, flashback, or anything that interrupted her functioning. She worked on really integrating these tools into her everyday life so that when she was in a situation that she was struggling with these things, she could literally go to a physical binder that she had developed that had handouts and worksheets that helped her to kind of cope with those situations. They would include grounding techniques and relaxation techniques. In addition to receiving counseling, she also received personal advocacy from some of our staff here. She was requested to do a photo lineup at the police department to try and identify some of her offenders, and a staff member came and helped her provide some support during that time. And she found that to be very helpful. She was extremely scared to go and do that on her own. So Lynn did receive counseling in our program for about a year. And over time, her functioning gradually began to improve. Her nightmares and flashbacks decreased. She stopped experiencing the panic attack. She was able to sleep more thoroughly, throughout the night, and she found that she was better able to trust people again. So that's an example of some of the common processes that somebody goes through in terms of receiving counseling services here in our program. I did want to talk a little bit about some of the opportunities that we have available to people who might be interested in getting involved in our program. We do take on master's level counseling interns. So if somebody is interested in a practicum experience in this area, this would be a program that would potentially be available to them. And then we also have volunteer opportunities where people can provide some of that medical advocacy where you respond to the hospitals 24 hours a day or on the 24-hour crisis line, as well as legal advocacy. We also have a variety of sexual violence awareness events that occur throughout the year, and sometimes volunteers help us with those things. So if you have any further questions or would like to be in contact with me, I'm sure we can show some of my contact information, but our number here is 262-619-1634, and our website is SAS of LSS, one word, .org.